Good morning, everybody. Welcome on this beautiful Friday morning. Special welcome to our friends in the Jewish community and the Christian community. I hope today is really a day full of grace and faith, and I really hope it's a day filled with healing and rebirth, as our president said last night. As an introduction, I'd like just to introduce myself. My name is Werner Teichert. For those of you that joined last week as well, I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm also the managing director of the South African DBT Institute. So we've got a few panelists this morning. We've got Karin Iman, who's a counseling psychologist. We've got Dr. Tria Ramasa, who's a psychiatrist. Dr. Miriam Close, who's a psychiatrist. And we've got Hanneke Jonas, who's an occupational therapist. Guys, I don't know if you maybe just quickly want to say hello, just the means of also checking if everything is working.
Hi, morning to Werner, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm sure it's going to be an interesting and beneficial webinar, so thank you for your time.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us as well. I just want to wish everybody a blessed Easter and a happy Passover to those who are celebrating, and be safe.
Good morning. I'm very excited to join you guys this morning, and as Jia said, happy Passover.
Hi everyone, enjoy this morning.
Okay, excellent. Guys, now the format of our sessions, as you would have noticed last week as well, is generally the first 20-25 minutes is a teaching component, and then the second half of the session is about Q&A. So we've got a panel, we've got quite a knowledgeable, and I'm quite privileged actually to have them as a panel. So if you've got any questions, you'll see there's a Q&A section. If you're on your phone, it's the top of your screen. If you're on your computer, it's the bottom of your screen. During the course of the session, I'd really invite you to use the Q&A section. Our panel has got access to it. You can ask anonymous questions if you really want to. While we're busy talking, obviously there's going to be questions that will be answered. The other option you have is the chat column, and that you also can ask a lot of questions there if you feel like you want to. Okay. So as a means of checking in this morning, I thought I'd go just check in with regards to what this group is all about. So firstly, there's identified 3 needs. Last week I said some people want to learn, they want to listen, they want to gain new knowledge or skills, they're curious about how and what we're doing, and that's perfect. So you're just here, you want to learn, you want to listen. The second group of people are here to link up. They want to support other practitioners, and they want to be an active participant. And now we've really been overwhelmed by the amount of people that have actually come forward and said, we want to help. And then lastly, some people need support. So you've come to this group and you've actually said, listen, I need support, and we're here for you as well. So towards the end of today, I'm also going to give you some details that you can forward onto, if you've got requests. So as a start today, what I'd like you to do is I'd just like to tell me, are you here to learn and listen, or here to link up, or do you need support or motivation? So I'd like you in the chat column just to share with us a little bit around just checking in. Why are you here this morning? Which of these categories you fall into? Okay. Excellent. Fantastic. Okay. Great stuff. Right. So I thought I'd take 30 seconds, just talk about the purpose of the Renew groups. The whole purpose of today is we spend a lot of time on our patients. We spend a lot of time on our caring for people. So the purpose of Friday mornings from 8 to 9 is it's you as the mental health for you as the healthcare professional. It's therapy for the therapist, and it's to learn skills and motivation, if that's what it's to learn skills, or if you need motivation. And it's also to access resources. It's for you to be able to say, well, I've got something extra that I can actually put in my toolbox, that if I'm helping someone, that I can also have access to that. So what I want to do is I want to take a few minutes just to recap from last week for those of you that weren't on the session. We discussed 3 states of mind. We discussed the fact that you've got emotional mind, which is heart mind, which is a mind that's devoid of any rationality, which is often when clients come to see us, they're in emotion mind. Then that could be in the form of anger, it could be form of depression, and that obviously clouds decision-making processes. Then there's rational mind, which is on the other side of the spectrum. Rational mind is cold mind. That's the mind that's just rational. Everything is logical. And the goal for dialectical behavior therapy would be to synthesize these two, and in the middle, to find wise mind. In other words, that you can use both emotional mind and you can use rational mind to get into the middle, which is wise mind. That's middle path. The second thing we discussed last week were what skills, and that was observe, describe, participate. So the idea with these skills and the exercise we did together was for you actually to say, how can I self-soothe myself, and how can I become more mindful in this moment? And a very effective way to do that is to actually use your senses, the sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of hearing. And those are the what skills: the ability to observe, describe, and participate. The ability to use your senses to observe, to describe what you're seeing in a non-judgmental way, and then to participate fully. In other words, to not allow yourself to, that little voice in the back of your mind to go, why am I doing this? It's the ability to remain focused and to remain as a participant. And then lastly, what we covered last week was the how skills, non-judgmentally, one mindfully and effectively. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. Remember what I said last week, mindfulness is at the core of all DBT, which means whatever skills we learn on top of it, or whatever skills we learn on top of mindfulness actually goes back to mindfulness the whole time. And we'll unpack that a little bit later as well. This is just what I mentioned. Now, what I'd like to find out from you is obviously in the week that's gone by, I asked you just to, if you find moments where seemingly tedious moments, as a time to sing to yourself. Example, taking a mindful shower, or drinking coffee slowly, taking advantage of being forced to slow down. I'd like to take just 30 seconds in the chat column. I'd like you just to give a bit of feedback. What were some of the things, if at all? If you did it, that's wonderful. If you didn't, that's okay. I just want to get a sense of the exercises we did last week, and if you did some of them and what the impact was. Okay, so I'm just going to allow you guys I'm going to take just 10 seconds for you to share some of that. Okay. See someone ate their breakfast mindfully. They were using the Headspace app, paint by numbers. Awesome. I see there's quite a couple of people that did something. I would actually invite you to do. That's a continuous exercise, not so much something you do once and it's homework that you did and you write it off. The idea is that you find a way to build that into your life. Okay, see there's someone that says it's potentially life-changing. Excellent. Mindful shower. Great stuff. Okay. So that was last week. We spoke about mindfulness and chaos. And I mentioned last week, DBT provides us a model for flattening the emotional curve. Because what we're finding is people are dysregulated. We're finding that people in the midst of all of this, and that's what I mentioned last week as well, they didn't get the manual how to deal with what's happening to them at the moment. They didn't get the how to actually deal with an international pandemic. They didn't get the manual how to deal with little children at home in one space for 5 weeks based on what our president said last night. They didn't get the manual. And what we said is DBT provides 4 primary ways that we respond to a serious problem. The one being change how you feel about it, which is what we looked at last week. Tolerate and accept it, which is what we're going to look at this week. And the third one is to figure out how to solve the problem, which is what we're going to look at next week. The fourth option, like I said last week, is kind of linear and being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, stay miserable or possibly make it worse by using those skills. So what we're trying to do today is to actually say, how do we engage skillfully with this situation? Okay. So the topic we're going to cover today is accepting what we got, not what we wanted. Now, I, at university, used to have this habit. I used to buy whole bags of these chappies. I don't know if you remember these chappies with those fun facts inside. I remember my roommates always used to mock me because I had this bag of chappies next to me when I was studying. And they had these little, absolutely pieces of useless information, but it was fun nonetheless. So in one of them, I found that it said, frogs swallow with their eyes closed. Now, my immediate thought was, who did this research? Who watched a frog while they were swallowing and thought, wow, this is really empirically significant. We need to document this. Frogs swallow with their eyes closed. Now, in preparation for today, I actually thought about that, and I said, it's actually such a powerful metaphor for mindfulness, because we have found a way, and I include myself in that, and us as healthcare professionals find a way to hide behind busyness, to hide behind possibly seeing more clients, studying something else, working longer hours, going to gym earlier. We find a way to cope, and those are all, most of those things are really functional for us. But moments like this, where there's a moment of crisis, kind of drags us into the now, where a lot of what's happening around us, we swallow with our eyes closed. We take in the world around us, but we don't really absorb the world around us. And what happens in a crisis like this is we really get dragged into the here and now, and we've got no choice but to observe. We've got no choice but to open our eyes and to say, well, what is happening? Especially considering the fact that most of us are on the front lines. We are dealing with individuals with high levels of anxiety. We are dealing with individuals, possibly if you're here today, we've got doctors joining us, we've got whole multidisciplinary team basically joining us here today. If you're on any one of those teams, you will know that we're on the front line of this. And we actually don't get to swallow with our eyes closed anymore. We're opening up our eyes and we're saying, okay, how do we actually deal with this crisis ourselves first? And then we go over into helping other people. And it presents us with a choice. We can either protest or we can accept reality. We can respond willful or we can respond willingly. So the first exercise I'd like to do this morning is a mindfulness exercise, but it's also a reality acceptance exercise. It's observing your thoughts and emotions. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take 30 seconds, have a look at those stats, and then I'd like you to share in the chat column, just in a non-judgmental way, what are your thoughts and emotions that come up. If you are this morning in a space where you don't want to share, that's okay. I'd like you just to take a moment. If you've got a piece of paper next to you and you want to write down, instead of sharing on the chat column, that's perfectly fine. The chat column is anonymous. We see it, but obviously we're not going to disclose what you're saying. But the exercise to observe your thoughts and emotions. Pretend like you're a diver at the bottom of your ocean and your thoughts are just little boats coming by and you're just looking at what it's actually saying. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds just to share a little bit about what are the thoughts and emotions that come up for you. Okay, thank you so much to everybody that shared. I mean, I can see there's a lot of people anxious, scared for my doctors. Observing thoughts, observing emotions. Very, very important exercise. Heart beating faster, urge to do something else, maybe go look at my phone rather. I notice I want to avoid it. Okay. Then obviously the next picture would be this one. Lockdown extended ministers to donate 33% of their salaries to help COVID-19 fight. So once again, last night, if you're anything like me, I mean, I've got two beautiful children, but last night there was a moment when my wife and I realized that there's another 3 weeks of the lockdown. And that obviously has a lot of implications for a lot of moms and dads and families. And if you don't have children, it has an implication for you and your partner. I found that people during this time, they either get the relationship become a lot closer, or they become a lot more distant. So I think what we're sitting with as healthcare professionals, and what dialectical behavior therapy allows for, is this dialectical reality. And it's a very important concept to start off with, because it's balancing acceptance and change. So on the one side, where it is what we can change in any situation, when working with a client, when working with a patient, when working with whoever you're working with in life, there's this dialectic that's happening the whole time. On the one side is what is it that I can change about the situation, but the other side of the dialectic is what do I need to accept about the situation? Because if I can't change it, and I keep holding on to the idea that I can, I'm holding on to the illusion of control. The flip side of that would be I'm lacking acceptance, which means I'm actually making myself miserable. But then there's, as I'm going to discuss a little bit later as well, there's another component where they say sometimes individuals hand over control of their lives, where they've got the ability to change and they've accepted things that they should have actually been able to change. In this case, an exercise that I sometimes do with patients, I actually ask them to go and write down what are the thoughts that's coming up for them, like we did a little bit earlier, the thoughts and emotions, what's coming up for them, and to ask themselves the question, which one of these things can they change and which one of these things they need to accept? Because in the gap between what I need to accept and what I can change, that's the space where people often find their anxiety, because they sometimes try and change things they need to accept, and vice versa. So why accept reality? Because rejecting reality does not change reality. Changing reality requires first accepting it. And I'll unpack that a little bit later. Rejecting reality turns pain into suffering. And pain can't be avoided. It's nature's way of signaling that something is wrong. But here's the dialectic for us. It's what we got. This situation is what we got. We didn't ask for this. I think 2 or 3 months ago, someone would probably have said that this is impossible. It can't happen. But it has happened. It's what we got. It's not what we wanted. But not wanting it is not making it go away. So us not wanting it is not actually changing the fact that it is happening. So radical acceptance is when you can't keep painful events from coming. It's accepting the things you cannot change with your mind, heart, and body. It's letting go of your attachment to the outcome. The difference between acceptance and reality and radical acceptance then being, acceptance is I can look at the facts and I can say, well, okay, I'm accepting this. Radical acceptance means you're throwing yourself into it completely. And I'm actually going to play a video clip a little bit later by Marsha Linehan, which is kind of the author of dialectical behavior therapy, and how she actually explains radical acceptance. And so the question is, what has to be accepted? What has to be accepted is reality as it is, about the past and the present. The idea is not to take our crystal ball out and predict the future. The idea is not for us to say, I'm accepting my future fate as if it's already happened. The idea is to accept the past and the present for what it is, not for what we want it to be. And what has to be accepted? Limitations on the future. The idea is that we actually can say there are certain things we can no longer do based on this reality. And the idea is to say that there's no catastrophizing. especially when working with patients and clients who are so stressed and dysregulated. The idea is that we can actually help them see that whatever events happen in the future, if you can find a way of accepting what's happening right now, you can actually find a way of accessing resources for the future. And what has to be accepted is life can be worth living even in the midst of pain. So radical acceptance is not approval, it's not passive, and it's not against change. What I don't want you to hear today is that radical acceptance just means I'm okay with everything. Radical acceptance does not mean I say, well, everything's just fine. It's not a denial. It's an acceptance. It's engaging with your heart, mind, body. It's engaging with all of your being in a way that I can actually say I can access resources because I've moved beyond the space where I'm still fighting it. So radical acceptance is not approval, passive, or against change. Now, in describing this idea of protesting, I thought about two examples. The first one, and what we're saying is the opposite of acceptance is protesting, which is a very normal human response, by the way, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. But the two examples I've got here is the first one is I've got a little Yorkshire Terrier. This Yorkshire Terrier is called Tiger. Okay, so I know he's got an ironic name. He weighs 1.9 kilograms. He's very small. But since he was a little puppy, he's always thought that he can beat up the thunder. Okay, so he's always, whenever there's thunder around, he becomes agitated. So he would run outside and he would be barking at the thunder, and this little Yorkie is convinced that his barking is making such an impact on the thunder that he's actually able to make it stop, which we obviously know is not. So he's protesting the reality. He's got a certain emotion, he's got a certain amount of anger and frustration, and I don't know what else. But the point is, he's protesting what's happening outside of him, but it's having absolutely no impact. The second example I want to give, and that's from a patient. I did ask the person's permission. I asked their permission a few years ago because I've shared this in a few of my workshops. But it's a patient that came to see me and they had dwarfism. Now, what they came with was the fact that they were tired of everybody calling them small. They were tired of everybody calling them all sorts of names. That's the first thing. The second thing they came with was the fact that the person had a girlfriend that was normal length and normal height. And so he was really tired of people staring at them in shopping malls. So he was saying, he came to therapy and he was saying, I'm so tired of everybody calling me small. I'm so tired of everybody calling me names. And I'm tired of going to a mall and everybody staring at my girlfriend and I. So for him, the process was towards acceptance because his anger, anxiety, and depression was not making him any taller. So the reality for him is that he needed to move towards radical acceptance. And that didn't just mean conditional being okay with it. It meant with his whole body and his whole mind and his whole soul, he needed to accept the fact that he was a certain height and that when walking in the malls, I asked him the question, I said, if you are walking in a mall and you see someone, their height differs significantly, is it something you will look at? And his answer was yes. I said, are you in fact shorter than than the average person? And his answer was yes. And I said, so the problem is not so much you being a certain height as it is you not accepting that you are. And what protesting looks like, it's shaking your fists at the sky, but it doesn't change the situation, nor does it make you feel any better. On the contrary, repetitive protest thoughts distract you from gaining greater self-awareness, thinking of ways to solve problems, and taking action. Disbelief, denial, and bargaining are all normative automatic reactions to discomfort, fear, and trauma. We engage in such thinking both in response to the internal world of our own feelings, as well as external events such as COVID-19. So some examples of internal protesting is this paradoxical dance we spoke about last week. It's I will not feel sad when you are in fact feeling sad. And us as healthcare professionals can protest this, and it's an internal protest, by saying this is not fair. Why do I need to go to hospital? Why do I need to be the one seeing patients? Why is this happening? An internal protest, if you have to stay at home, could be something like, this is not fair. Why is it happening? But the more time we spend trying to fight reality, the more defeated, overwhelmed, and helpless we feel, because denial simply cannot change reality. Just like my Yorkshire Terrier, if he goes outside, he barks at the thunder. He's not making any impression on the thunder. The symptoms or the emotions we had a little bit earlier, and the thoughts we had about those figures, and the thoughts we had about the lockdown being prolonged, is not necessarily making the figures go down or making the lockdown any shorter. Which means we are in a position where we're saying, if we don't find a way of accepting this, we will be protesting this for the next 3 weeks, and we will actually be delaying the ability to accept and find a way to actually mobilize resources. External process looks something like, this disease cannot be as contagious or lethal as they're saying it is. It's almost a denialism. Or this has got to end before I have to cancel my plans. So I think most of us at some stage or another have had as a discomfort with regards to plans being changed or plans being postponed. And I think so this is a way of external protesting. Okay. So I'd like to use an exercise. So as you guys are sitting, I'd like you to, I'm just going to move this over here. It's a willingness exercise. And I'd like you to find a comfortable space, both feet on the ground. Your hands communicate to your brain, and your brain connects to your body. So the idea is that in using an acceptance skill, we're able to actually say our body can mimic something which our mind cannot comprehend yet. So the part one, I'd like you to sit down, place both feet on the ground, and your hands on your lap with palms facing upwards and your fingers relaxed. I'd like you to go to the thoughts and the emotions you had a little bit earlier. And maybe while I was talking, you had certain, some things came up that you might need to let go of in this moment. Maybe there were certain thoughts, or maybe you've realized there's been protesting which has prevented you from accepting. So I'd like you to take 30 seconds and ask yourself the question with your palms facing upwards, what do I need to let go of? What have I been protesting that I need to accept? I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds for that. And if you want to, you can share in the chat column. But you're also welcome in the Q&A section while I'm talking to also ask questions. Okay, thank you very much, everybody that's sharing. I invite you actually to continue this exercise, even during this week, because I think, I said it last week and I'll say it again, I think our president is being very proactive. And I think we are in a preparation phase. And the hope is that we won't go over into an active phase where things actually start spiraling out of control. But I think regardless of what happens to the people around us as healthcare professionals, if we can use this exercise to actually move from protesting to accepting quicker, I think we can mobilize resources in ourselves and in the people around us a lot quicker. Okay. Now, something I shared last week, which I'd just like to touch on again, is I actually want to get to the Q&A section today, because I think what I'm seeing is there are really a lot of really good questions coming through. Something I shared last week, but I'd just like to touch on it again. So I shared the idea of last week of the zone that we are in, and that the space in the middle here, I call that the regulation zone. That is where we still feel regulated. And within this space right here is normal human emotion, where people have a normal up, and the upward in this case would be emotions that carry energy. And this could be in the form of anger. It could be in the form of anxiety. It could be in a variety of different forms that we actually see people carrying this emotion. And us as healthcare professionals, that we are now faced with a situation where we are prompted, and our response is actually also going upwards, because we are also human. And so the idea is that we find ways to say, well, how can we flatten this curve for ourselves? If there's an emotional response, there's something happening in our environments, how do we actually flatten this curve for ourselves? I have found that people with a lack of acceptance take longer to do this. So individuals with a lack of acceptance, I'm just going to draw this for you. Individuals with a lack of acceptance, or still protesting a reality which they cannot change. Remember this dialectic between change and acceptance. Individuals who cannot find a way of accepting and mobilizing resources actually oscillate like this, instead of finding a way where they find a new equilibrium, where they can go down low enough that they can actually say, I can function in a more useful way. Especially with our clients, I think if we've got that ability to ground ourselves using acceptance-based skills, more specifically radical acceptance, I think that'll be great for us, and it will also be great for the people around us. Okay. So the other concept I'd like to share with is responding willfully or willingly. So willfulness is refusing to tolerate the moment, refusing to make changes that are needed, giving up the opposite of doing what works, trying to fix every situation, insisting on being in control, and is attachment to me, and what I want right now. So responding in a willful or willing manner. Willfulness is ego. Willfulness is I'm holding on, I'm refusing, I'm protesting. And a willing response, the opposite of that then would be willingness is doing just what is needed in each situation wholeheartedly without dragging your feet. Willingness is listening very carefully to wise mind and then acting from your wise mind. Willingness is acting with awareness that you are connected to the universe. Okay, so I'd like to play you guys a video clip by Marsha Linehan, and then I'm going to jump over to the panel, and then I'm going to give you an exercise I'd like you to do during the course of this week. Just want to get my camera sorted. Okay.
I've been transformed by the very therapy that I developed. Because once I realized that I had to teach the clients acceptance, I realized at that very same moment in my own personal life, I had somehow lost my ability to accept, and that I was going to have to learn it myself. And so I ended up taking a sabbatical point or time off from my job. What I found out when I went to the first Buddhist monastery was within days, I knew that I had found exactly what my clients needed. I had no doubts about it. I figured that out right away. That acceptance was exactly what they needed, but that they had a way of teaching it that I could translate. My problem was I tried to take it stock and barrel to my client. At Shasta Abbey, the basic message was all the time to try to radically accept everything and to let go of desires and what you want. So we got jobs every single morning. And so it was the idea of practicing letting go of wanting a particular job. If you were sweeping, they would tell you when the bell rang for work to stop, they would tell you stop in the middle, because finishing is just your own thing. You're trying to do something you want to do, just let go. So it was this whole practice of just constantly, moment by moment, letting go of what you want and radically accepting what is. It was the first environment I'd ever been in. It was completely non-sexist. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I'm not kidding. It was so unbelievable. Men and women would get the same jobs. There was no real distinction. I mean, admittedly, it may not have been helpful if I hadn't just completely thrown myself into it. But since I decided ahead of time that I had to learn this, my only option was just to do everything I was told. Just throw myself in. And I was a student, so there were 8 of us. We did everything together. It was really the practice of letting go of having to have what you wanted at any moment. And the recognition that you didn't have to always have whatever it was you wanted. That had a big effect in some ways on the therapy, that in the sense that I try to teach clients, suppressing what you want is not the way to go. You have to radically accept that you want something you don't have, and it's not a catastrophe. And so I stayed there for 2 months. Then I went to Germany to the Catholic priest. It was actually the first time in my life I ever talked to someone who actually understood me, the spiritual part of me. Given that my spiritual part of myself is the core of myself, more central than anything else about me, having that understood was an amazing experience. It had a transformative effect on me. What it did is it gave me a home. I am now convinced that it was the practice of radical acceptance every moment that will transform you. I don't have the slightest doubt. It would transform everyone. But it has to be a regular practice. And radical acceptance doesn't mean you don't try to change things, because you only have to radically accept the moment that you're in and the past. But you can try to change the next moment. You can't change anything if you don't accept it, because if you don't accept it, you'll try to change something else that you think is reality. So radical acceptance is simply the radical acceptance that reality is what it is. And if you want to change it, then you work on changing it, which is perfectly legitimate also. But I think it's hard to change something if you don't accept it in the first place.
Okay. Guys, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to do one more exercise, and while we're doing that exercise, I'd like to throw open a Q&A, because like I said, we've got about 23 minutes left. And we've got, I'm sure, look, I'll be completely honest. I think this part of DBT is probably the hardest session I go into. I mean, we've got a 24-week program. And this is the hardest week, because you've got people that walk in with trauma, you've got people that walk in with things that have happened, which they've got difficulty accepting. And I think right now we're in the midst of that. And this is probably the hardest session I have in those 24 weeks. So I'd like to throw open the Q&A section. If you've got any questions, like I said, you can ask them anonymously. We've got a panel that is willing to answer. And as we are kind of throwing open the questions, there's one more exercise that I'd like to just do with you guys. And it's an exercise that I want you to actually do, that dreaded word as homework as well. It's an exercise you can actually sit down and as you did a little bit earlier, sitting down with your palms facing upwards, both feet on the ground, just to observe. Remember, we did observe, describe participate, and I said right at the beginning, mindfulness is the core of all DBT. The first one is to observe some of the internal and external protests you have about the current situation. Okay. Look for anger, bitterness, annoyance, avoiding emotions, saying, why me? Why is this happening? I can't stand this. It shouldn't be this way. So looking at that in a non-judgmental way. The second step would be to say, go within yourself and make an inner commitment to accept reality as it is. A little bit earlier, I asked you to open your hands, and I asked you to let go of some of the things that you're holding on to, some of these internal and external protests, because these protests are not changing the situation. Do it again over and over. Keep turning your mind to acceptance each time you come to the fork in the road where you can reject reality or accept it. You can protest or you can accept. And so this exercise, turning the mind, is about, I'm actually saying, I can accept this or I can reject this. I can accept or I can protest. And every time there's a protest, having the discipline to then say, I'm accepting. And then lastly, it's to develop a plan for catching yourself in the future when you drift out of acceptance. Okay. I did forward last week's slides as well, so I'm going to be forwarding this as well. So it's an observe, make an inner commitment, do it again, and develop a plan. Okay. Right. Q&A section. All right. I see there are 2 questions already. But what I'm going to do, so I'm going to throw the questions at the panel firstly, but secondly, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to maybe discuss, ask the question about how do they find, but we'll get to that after the questions, how do they also apply radical acceptance, maybe not in their own lives, but also with those of their clients. So Annika, I see, there's a question, acceptance is normally the end of the process. Someone has asked that or made the statement. I don't know if you maybe want to answer that.
Yeah, I'd like to answer it. I just want to agree with Wagner that reality acceptance and radical acceptance are some of the most difficult skills to teach. It's almost a skill that you need to feel first as a therapist to enable you to actually share it with others and help them to feel it as well. If we say that acceptance is only at the end of the process, the beauty of the skill is that you can actually already start accepting in the process. And if we don't accept, we turn pain, normal pain that we do have when we go through difficult times, into suffering because it prolongs it. So the idea of reality acceptance is to, once you are noticing that you are not accepting, that you would start incorporating reality acceptance principles to get to acceptance as close as quickly as possible, so that you can get to the problem solving part, so that you actually can move on from there. Yeah, I think that's my bit of comment on that.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to comment on that, or so maybe someone wants to go on to the next question?
Hi, Vanna.
Yes.
I would just like to make, a statement just to kind of, when in terms of doing these skills and looking at the questions and just listening to Hanneke, I'm also just reminded of the Serenity Prayer. I just think it also kind of, illustrates some of the concepts that we're talking about today. And just to, state the Serenity Prayer. It's about granting me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I was thinking, it really brings out a lot of the skills that we're talking about today in terms of radical acceptance, in terms of being mindful, in terms of being present. So I think it also incorporates a lot of these meaningful skills in this prayer, in the statement.
Okay. So thank you very much for that, Miriam. So I think the other question I came up with is engaging your body before your mind. Karine, I don't know if you maybe want to answer something on that. In other words, some of the exercises you've maybe found, I know you work a lot with teenagers, some of the things that you've maybe found useful in acceptance, but also engaging with your body before your mind.
Hi, Vanna, thanks. I think one of the ways that we can easily engage with our body before our mind in terms of radical acceptance is to use our mindfulness skills to identify what it is that we actually need to accept, because that'll probably, and we'll probably experience that in our body first. So if you can use your mindfulness skills to realize when your heartbeat's going up, when you're feeling tense about something, then that'll help you to give some kind of indication of what it is that you actually need to accept.
Sure.
But this is also a bit of a dialectic, because I think for many others, the awareness comes to their mind first, and maybe radical acceptance is sometimes more of a choice than it is something that we feel in our bodies.
Yeah, so I agree with you. So the kind of skill of turning your mind, what you're saying now is that some people feel it in their bodies and other people kind of start feeling it in their thoughts. And it's having the ability to then say, I can accept in a non-judgmental way. That's part of the house skills we discussed last week of mindfulness, is that I can accept my own thoughts, even in a non-judgmental way. That I'm not judging the fact that I'm actually struggling to accept this. And I'm not judging myself either for wanting things to be different. But I am saying I'm moving beyond that and saying I cannot change it, therefore I need to accept it. Anneke, the next question, he said you want to answer live. Yes.
Yeah, so would you recommend some sort of external reminder for acceptance, perhaps in a place where it will be seen often? That's always helpful to have an external reminder to just quickly check. So if we need to check regularly, it would be what are my emotions doing, and to be mindful of your body's responses and your thoughts. So if we are, and that helps to get us into a routine where we check, is there anything that we are willful about or that we are resisting that might turn into suffering? So having an external cue definitely would be helpful. And an external cue can be something like Miriam suggested, the Serenity Prayer, putting it up somewhere where you will often see it. Or it might just be a picture that has a certain meaning for you that can remind you to be more mindful of accepting. Werner, there was another question of, if I'm resilient and I am usually getting through these things with not much difficulty, and people do comment on that, is it not just denial? It is possible that it is denial. But be mindful of your emotions again, and stay connected regularly with yourself to check, exactly as I explained with the previous question.
Yeah, I see Jackie's asked, I see there's someone that asked the question. I also think that because we are at the beginning of the anticipated storm, it is going to be a process, because we may face things we have never anticipated before, and be okay with the fact that this will be a process. In other words, what she's saying is that we're potentially at the beginning of a storm, and we may things that we may face things we've never anticipated before, and is it okay that we accept the fact that it's going to be a process? Miriam, I don't know if you or Corinne maybe wants to answer this one. I can also jump in, but I'm wondering if you guys have some thoughts on that. Clients may be sitting in front of you, or you as a healthcare professional, we're facing things we've never faced before. I know, I'd actually like, Miriam, is there something you'd like to respond?
Hi, thanks, Werner, and thank you for the question. I think, it's definitely, again, about being mindful, being present, acknowledging this is something that we have no understanding about. We're going to try our best to, utilize the resources that we do have available. I think it's also about reaching out, leaning on our colleagues, leaning on our family, looking out for support to make sure that we're okay, so that we can be okay, so that our patients and the ones that we love and around us can be okay. So I think it's about, just being as solid as we can in the storm for ourselves and for others.
Corinne, I don't know if there's something you want to add to that, maybe.
I think what's making this specific situation very tricky is that it can go either way. we can on the one end be very scared for the storm coming, but at the other side of this dialectic, we can be very thankful and happy for the fact that it seems like we're actually managing it very well at this stage. And I think that's something that helps with acceptance, is that it's not necessarily just a thing that we have to radically accept something that's bad. We can also radically accept not knowing and being in the uncertainty.
Okay. Threa, we're going to see if we can, if you said you wanted to answer. I know you have said you're at home and there's might be one or two challenges to your internet, but we're going to have to radically accept that as well right now and try and see if there is something that you'd like to answer. Threa, I don't know if there's something you'd like to just add to that. You just have to unmute yourself. There we go. Okay.
All right. Firstly, apologies for my internet connection at home. But just, I think actually Jackie brought up, I actually agree with her. I completely agree with what she's mentioned about the anticipated storm. We actually have no idea. And like Karine also mentioned, it's about radically accepting that we don't know the answers to this.
Yes.
And that as time goes on, we will, and just give ourselves that opportunity to accept that it's okay to not know. I think one of my colleagues explained it very nicely. She described this like a tsunami wave. And she said, right now it's all clear and we're sitting on the beach and the water has retracted. And we're actually not sure when the wave comes in, how high it's going to be. Are we going to be able to flatten the curve or not? And I guess that's where we are at this point in time. So it's about accepting that it's okay. The tsunami may come, it may not. But I think we're working together to be prepared for it. And that's the important thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. Annika, you actually said you wanted to add something as well. I don't know if there is something or you'd like to go on to the next question.
It's just a general comment, Werner, and radical acceptance, we think it's a once-off. It's often a again and again and again until we really feel it in our body, our soul, and our minds. So, and when information comes in and it changed the situation, we would have to radically accept the new facts that are presenting themselves. So don't think that this is a once-off. Once you've done it with a patient or once you've done it with yourself, it's all fine and dandy. Actually, it's not. You actually gonna probably have to do it again and again.
Karine, there's a question you said you wanted to answer the next one.
So the question was around accepting a situation where, for example, you are in a situation where abuse is present and whether or not you should just accept that current situation or do something about it. And I think this is actually thematic of a question that I get a lot when I talk about radical acceptance to clients. Because some people feel that radical acceptance might be accepting that you're just a victim and kind of being okay with it. And that's really not the case. I think a nice example to explain it is if you have a fear of the dentist and you really hate going there, but you have a cavity. Then radical acceptance means that you accept that you have a cavity. You accept that you fear the dentist, but you still go to the dentist and you still have your cavity fixed. Because sitting in denial, thinking that you're going to ignore the cavity or you're going to ignore the fact that you're scared is not going to help you. And I think the same applies in a situation of abuse, especially in this time where many people might be in their homes with abusive partners or parents, that we have to accept that when we say radical acceptance, we don't mean that it's okay to be abused and you just sit there and accept that this is your situation. It means that you accept this is your situation and therefore you do something about it. Therefore, you still go to the dentist, if
Sure.
that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Karina, I'd like to maybe to add to what you just said. I often find that, let's go to another example, people that are in jobs that they need the money right now. In other words, they can't just leave, but they're in a work environment that's very toxic. So there's an element of accepting my situation as it is at the moment and as what has happened in the past. And I find people still protesting the moment as it is at the moment is actually making them more anxious and hopeless about the fact that things can be different. But it doesn't change, and that's this dialectic you've mentioned. It doesn't change the fact that I'm going to help them possibly say, what alternatives? And that's a big part of DBT is problem solving. Is actually saying, well, if I want to bring in change, once again, change and acceptance, I have to accept certain things, which brings the dialectic of change because then it means I can actually mobilize resources to change certain things. And I mean, what you said a little bit earlier is just the fact that as we are in the middle of something that is so massive and something that hasn't happened ever before. Well, not in our lifetimes at least. And it's finding a way to just actually acknowledge. And I mean, that's the paradox that I spoke about a little bit earlier in last week as well, is that we are, as healthcare professionals, if we can find a way of doing this for ourselves, we can actually show it to our clients as well. And in a mindful way as well. I don't know if any of you want to respond just in conclusion. I see there is one more question. Karin, I think you've just answered it already. Okay. Excellent. All right. So it's now 1 minute before 9. What I'd like to do is I would just like to finish off. And, you know, with two things. The first thing is maybe wrapping up today. We spoke about radical acceptance. We spoke about it as, remember I gave the example of frogs swallow with their eyes closed. We're not in a position, we actually as healthcare professionals, we can swallow with our eyes closed. We're actually in a position where our eyes are wide open and we're in the middle of this, and we have to accept reality for what it is and then move forward from that. Being aware of what radical acceptance means, but also then being aware of our own protests. There was an exercise that I gave you, that you actually sit down with your hands open. What do I need to let go of? What are the protests that I need to let go of? We discussed willfulness and willingness. And I think the panel has also, you know, significantly contributed to just answering the questions that were very specific. So what is next? If you were here to learn and listen, you know, today we spoke about distress tolerance, reality acceptance. I'd like you to go and read up on that a little bit more. We're going to check in with regards to that next week again. Next week, we're going to look at survival skills. How do I survive the crisis? And it's more specifically the emotional crisis. How do I, as a healthcare professional, survive the emotional crisis? If you're here to learn and listen, I'd like to go and read up on that. If you're here to link up, we are collaborating with multiple different stakeholders, SASOP, SAISA, PATASA. I mean, there's so many initiatives, and we're actually just connecting people to these different initiatives. If you want to reach out and you want to link up, go to online@dbtinstitute.co.za. And if you feel like you need support or motivation, email info@dbtinstitute.co.za. We would love to get in touch and also to support you personally if you need it. Guys, that's the end of it. I don't know if the panel just maybe wants to say something in conclusion, just to maybe say goodbye, or maybe some final thoughts you might have.
Just a goodbye and have a great weekend from my side.
From my side, thanks very much for giving up your public holiday Friday morning. I know we're all in lockdown, but we still appreciate you waking up early, even if you are in your pajamas. So enjoy the rest of the weekend. Good luck with all your patients and all the best. Bye.
Thank you, Verna, for this opportunity, and thanks to the panelists and to our attendees and participants. And I wish you well for this long weekend and for the rest of the lockdown, and stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend. Thanks, Werner.
Okay. Guys, have a blessed weekend, and I will see you again next week. If you need to get in touch, you've got the details. I see one person just asked around support groups for patients. We do run support groups on Tuesdays and Wednesdays as well for patients. You can check out our Facebook page for a bit more information on that. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.